Select board meeting. I'll call the select board meeting to order.
Jason, I hate to say that. Can you say for the recording? I'll just
Say it
on the
again.
recording. Can you say for the recording, please?
I'd like to call the select board meeting for April 11th to order.
The present are Jason and Matt and Brooke.
Thank you.
This is one of the requests we have from outside forces to make sure that we follow this properly. This is a request after the last meeting.
Okay.
Was to make sure to introduce everybody who's speaking, so
Okay,
the people at home know.
got it. And not present is Don Phil Holgate and Malcolm McNabb. Hopefully they'll be here.
So I'm gonna call the April 11th Conservation Commission workshop meeting to order. We have Ian Golding, Mark Beal, Seth Engelberg, myself, Mike Mazzarelli, and Joe Plandowski in attendance. Not sure if Linda will be showing up.
All right, and good evening, folks. Once again, my name is Tanya McCoy-Peretti. I'm with Arcadis. I'm here tonight with my fellow Arcadian, Jen Latimer. And we will be conducting, of course, the second workshop. And the plan for this evening is to get deeper into the tactical process that we need to get into. Of course, the purpose of bringing both of the groups together is to continue the conversation that we had 21 days ago, and to really have both the Conservation Commission and the Select Board working hand in glove to develop a plan that's in the best interests, of course, of everyone. We'll start again here at 5 o'clock. And we'll do a little bit of a recap by 5:30. We'll start to discuss the adapt scenario, which was scenario 2 from our last workshop. And at about 5:45, we'll move into the tactical plan. And what we're going to do is ideate around 3 buckets of what we feel are topics that need to be addressed in the development of the tactical plan. And then we're going to move those tactical steps, if you will, or actions onto a timeline. Now, it's just a timeline for the purposes of getting an idea of what needs to be done, what might we have missed, what else needs to go on, and and what is the target date, if you will. And then there will be much more that goes on, as you can see, right? My arrow, it goes out past 3 years, dealt very seriously that if we find anything that goes out past 3 years that we want to capture, we'll capture it. But for the purposes of this evening, we're going to try to stay in the next 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and work from there. Any questions about that? Okay, so just to recap where we came from following the last workshop. Some of the key takeaways. One, basically by the end of the workshop, all of the participants concurred that further exploration of scenario 2 is the best path forward, right? And again, some of you were in that 1.75 and some of you were in that 2.10, right? But scenario 2 seemed to be where we were going to focus our time. And although acknowledging that many of the details remain to be sorted out, including timeline, phasing, funding, leadership, and that's really what we're going to get to tonight. Also, if scenario 2 is ultimately implemented, a more comprehensive plan for strategic retreat must be created. So this is this is going to be the beginning of that plan, right? Those action steps that will need to be taken and some basic timeframes around them. And it will continue to be fleshed out over time.
For the audience, I wanted to let them know that we had another select board member join. Dawn.
I don't. Thank you. Jen.
And
And then finally, of course, we all acknowledge that extensive public and community engagement will be necessary, developed with awareness of the currently high, it's a polarizing issue, right? And because it is, There needs to be a lot of engagement from the community. There needs to be a lot of communication to the community. And you, as two groups and two boards, two groups of individuals, from a leadership standpoint, really need to control the message, right? You need to make sure that what is being said, that you've said, is actually what you've said, right? Control your message. Don't allow someone else to control your message. So would anyone like to add anything else to the key takeaways? That was a very quick summary of the takeaways. I'm happy to add anything else.
At the end of last meeting, we actually discussed the select board, the town, coming back with an application for a extension of the existing array.
Yes.
And felt there was some support for it on the Conservation Commission.
Mhm.
And I hope we get the chance to discuss that.
Yeah, I think that that's going to be one of those definite steps in that tactical plan, right? Would be to talk about what that plan working together looks like over time, and then maybe what the milestone dates will be, if you will, moving forward, okay?
I didn't know if for the audience, we need to repeat what the scenario 2 is, the one that we felt we had consensus for. But scenario 2 was adapt. And that involves neighborhood level planning was determined to be more appropriate rather than individual property planning. A timeline can be realistically planned in an orderly manner. Planned retreat is more palatable than scenario 3. Financial planning for relocation is more predictable. It engages with scientific realities related to climate change and its impact on Nantucket. And it provides an opportunity to work collaboratively to resolve the conflict in a sound manner. It's a synopsis of.
And that synopsis is actually your PostIt notes, right? At the end of the meeting, you each had PostIt notes, and those PostIt notes have been basically assimilated together, where you all had some of the same shared ideas, right? We put them together, and although we still have photos of the session, so if anybody wants to say, well, you know, I don't remember what I actually had on my PostIt note, or I don't think my PostIt note is actually captured there on that sheet, happy to make any modifications there. Okay. All right, so are we all good with where we ended 21 days ago and ready to push forward with the development of tactical next steps? Yeah, yes,
Yes.
yes. All right, so I have yeses nodding the entire way around the table. So let's have at it. So now when I looked at scenario 2, the adapt scenario, and when, you know, Kate was here with us last time, and when the technical team began to look at the adapt scenario, they suggested that we talk about what types of tactical next steps are planning related, what types of tactical next steps might be associated with agreements, and what type of tactical next steps might be associated with funding. Now, those are 3 buckets that we started with. Do you all feel that there should be a 4th bucket, or is there anything on here that could be added to or combined? And yeah.
I read the 90th survey report that was issued in March. And what really struck me was there are 2 sentences in there. It says, although there is substantial variability, no post-geotube changes have yet been observed that deviate substantially from the past observations. The present shoreline is at a similar location as compared to approximately 10 years ago, and no significant accelerated erosion has been noted. That tells me, in terms of time, there's a lot of time for the town to come up with a plan before they actually do something. And I'm saying a long time. The other thing I did is I went to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts site called sealevelrise.org. And it was really interesting because I hadn't paid any attention to this before, but in a 66-year period, they've been measuring the sea level in the Boston area. In 66 years, it's gone up 8 inches. Wow, what does that mean going forward? Well, they also did another projection. They said, look, the last 36 years, the level went up 6 inches. It's going to go up another 6 inches in 15 years. And I'm looking at all this saying, that's a lot of time. Thinking about moving the Baxter Road within a 5-year period doesn't jive with this data. And I don't know how that fits into what you're putting up here on the board.
Well, I would like to comment on that if I may. So, Joe, as you know, we had a family house on 99 Baxter Road. And in the 3-day nor'easters, we saw up to 30 feet taken out. And so I'm certainly not arguing with you about the average, but I feel that one really bad nor'easter could really make a difference. And so I don't feel quite as relaxed about a long-term scenario as you do.
It's not
apparently.
my conclusion.
No,
It's,
I
I'm
understand.
just reading
Right.
what materials I can lay my hands on, put some perspective into what's going on. I had no idea the water level rose as little as it did in 66 years. Not a clue. But it's rising. And the other thing that's interesting is that the sea level has been high and has been low over years. And I don't mean 10 years, I'm talking about 1,000,000 years. They've got some data on that site. When you look at it, you say, wow, what differences take place for a lot of reasons.
No, but I'd like to talk about this.
Okay.
I don't know if we need to do this, but for the record, my name is Seth Engelberg. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission. And I think this maybe falls possibly in planning, but I think it's a pre-step to planning, which is defining the scope of extent. So a lot of us are probably thinking, maybe we're just talking about this map, or just talking about Baxter Road. But if you look at what this meeting says, it says, Wisconsin Bluff, that's all the way off this map until all the way down here. And we also need to talk how far inward tactics are going to go. So we need to find a geographic scope of our planning before we define what the plan's going to be.
I'm gonna ask the question because then we're gonna go into an activity. So the activity is going to be that you all are going to, on the Post-it notes, identify the steps, identify things that you feel need to be done in planning. Would you be okay with adding a Post-it note that means we need to define the scope of planning before we plan? Or do you feel that I should add another sheet because there are several activities in pre-planning that need to be looked at or added to the timeline?
I don't know if it necessarily needs to be another whole sheet as long as it's the first step in that sheet.
Okay, all right, yeah, no. Actually, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put pre-planning down here. So if any of you feel you have pre-planning Post-its, put them down. If they're pre-planning activities, put them down here. And if, once the scope of the plan is developed, there are activities to execute the scope of the plan, then they'll go up here. All right?
In my other comment, something I brought up last week was, I think goes right to this stuff, is I don't think we can do it on a timeline of time. I think it's, there are certain triggers or certain things that are gonna be met that are gonna cause us to do the next steps.
Actually, you know what, Matt? I'm gonna ask you to hold up there, because when we move these over there, I am actually going to ask you then to identify on Post-it notes what those triggers might be. And we're going to put triggers over there, right, on that timeline, right? That we need to be well aware of, right? this type of trigger is gonna change, or this is a trigger that could potentially change timing, and this is a trigger that could potentially change the scope. And I'm not suggesting that the timeline over there is a timeline you will stick to. It's simply an order of activities. Pre-planning and developing a scope needs to come before executing planning activities, right? So that's more of an order of activity. And now I just selected time. Okay, yeah.
Who are the parties associated with the planning?
You're gonna define those. You're going to make those suggestions to us here. Who should be engaged in that plan, those planning related activities.
Yeah, and
Okay?
respectfully, if I may, that all is in the pre-planning. We need to determine what's the geographic extent, what's the
Well,
scope of
hold
the
on.
timeline, who's the
Hold on,
partners.
we're gonna put those on
Yeah,
Post-it notes.
write it on your Post-its.
I don't want you to forget those. Grab your
I
Post-it
got
That's
it,
a
notes.
good-
I got it.
Yeah, good. And, you know, again, and try to capture all of them, right? Because our goal here is to lay everything out, to ensure that we've done our best job to capture all of the steps that need to be completed, right? In the for tactical execution. So we will start. It's 5:17 now, so like 5 minutes or until I see you running out of steam, let's talk about pre-planning and planning. Okay, so activities that, both groups, either together or independently, right? Because as groups, you have independent activities that you need to accomplish also. So together or independently, what do you think the tactical steps are during pre-planning? And what are the tactical steps during planning? Or the things you need to do during planning and pre-planning? And capture them on Post-it notes, write big, and as many steps in the process as you can come up with.
Joe, can you use the marker? So it's easier to read.
I've got a lot.
You got it, okay.
Plenty of markers. I'm sure.
It's so when we take pictures, it's easier to read.
I'll start taking some of these and read them out and put them up, then that'll help to get all of your juices going. Do you mind if I take a couple of yours? Yep, pre-planning, okay, planning, wanna get that one, Jen? Okay, so from a pre-planning
Pre-planning or
standpoint,
planning?
define the geographic
Pre-planning.
extent. Pre-planning, define planning and partners and stakeholders.
I'm sorry, I have the worst handwriting here.
And from a planning standpoint, who plans? Okay, that's pre-planning.
Dr. Seth.
Geographic parameters, you guys are, for each other, okay?
This one says make
Thank
up
you.
the current sand deficit. Was a pre-planning.
Is that pre-planning?
I would say that's pre-planning.
Okay.
In other words, that's one of the elephants in the room.
Okay, identify necessary permitting and licensing, okay. Pre-planning,
That's in planning.
That's
planning,
yeah.
okay.
In planning or.
3 parties, select
Yeah, I see
board,
pre-planning.
conservation commission, and Baxter Road residents, okay? So that's defining the stakeholders. Address the topic of past sand deficit by ESBPF.
Determine town staff needed and capacity, additional consultants needed, question mark.
Okay,
So
pre-planning,
who's doing what?
who's doing what? And I have the hard copy print, Jen?
Review.
The hard copy. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Review NOI plan, you want to do that in pre-planning. Is
Well,
that
I mean,
what you
from a
think?
ConCom perspective, like, that's what we do.
Mhm.
You know, like, I worried a little bit that this process blurs the lines with like a regulatory commission. So whether that's reviewing the NOI or whoever's applying for an NOI is coming in for a pre-meeting,
Mhm.
that stuff needs to take place.
Mhm. Yeah, we talked last time about the NOI process being, for this particular project, right? Being an evolutionary process, right? And do we need to have it all 100% complete and submitted for review, or
Yeah, I mean.
do you review and develop all at the same time?
No, I mean, with some projects, and we did this with SBPF, we had kind of a pre-meeting. How would you feel about X, Y, Z? But like, as far as like a permitting entity, you know, reviewing plans to permit, it isn't like a rolling
No,
thing, you
yeah,
know,
but
so.
a lot of times when a regulatory agency, whether it's local government or state, gets involved in this type of a project, especially size and magnitude, it's, you have a tendency to kind of work through together concepts and ideas, and then in the end, the permit is issued. And I think you talked about the fact that you do that,
Right.
right? Yeah. Good. They put Baxter residents into an HOA. Do you want that, put Baxter residents into an HOA? Do we want that one in planning? Or do we actually want that one in all of them, planning, agreements, and funding? Because if you put them into an HOA, right, then you've got agreements that need to be worked out, and then you've got funding activities that need done.
I think you can unilaterally put people in HOA, they have to agree to be
Um,
part of it.
Wrong choice of words on my part. If an HOA is developed for the purposes of funding the project, right?
Using in agreements.
You wanna write
It
two
could
more?
be a
Who
betterment
wrote this one?
district or a critical
You wanna
planning.
write
It
two
could
more,
be
just like
some
it?
other entity.
Oh, because I'm gonna put it in agreements and funding also,
I don't know. What I- you know,
or we'll write it for you.
All right.
This one says town funding available, question mark.
That goes in funding, yeah. Revive the NOI. That's kind of a precursor.
I'll put
Okay.
it in
Complete longshore sediment transport study.
planning.
Identify how adaptation meets and fits into the goals of the CRP.
Have all existing data and reports reviewed by a third party.
Identify the sand source.
You beat me to it. That's
That's
exactly what I was writing.
Forgot that.
It was everybody right?
Yeah,
The same
Ashley
thing.
said
I was
Right,
actually-
sand source.
That's as far as I got.
There were
I did.
4 people around the table writing sand source. Okay.
And I put draft NOI. There's sort of, like, we have this NOI that was withdrawn, and then we have like, what's going to be the new NOI. So I feel like, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know
well,
where.
we have revived the NOI. I
Yeah.
guess we need to draft the,
It's
new
got,
one.
it's got to be a new,
Right, it has to
obviously,
be
it's
a
going
new
to be a new
one.
one.
and then you work together to develop the new one before it's finalized and submitted.
Well, again,
You can do that.
yes and no, like, we can help guide applicants,
No
but
one's
we're not
asking you to make
developing an
decisions.
NOI.
Yeah, no one's asking you to make decisions along the way, simply to provide guidance and direction and to say, yeah, we can get on board with that. Or, no, we can't get on board quite with that. We might suggest this, right? So to guide the process. Beautiful.
That November NOI is a good start in my mind.
I certainly wouldn't throw it all out.
No, no.
Identify ongoing legal, technical, and regulatory assistance for NOI process.
With provide the NOI.
I'm having a hard time with the word, but like, we gotta find out what actions or parameters, what's acceptable. When we're planning, we have to figure out what is it we're doing there. Are we doing a geotube? Are we doing, a core bag? And in what areas do we do what? I mean, at some point, we have to identify what it is we're trying to do where. I don't know what the word to say for that is, but
So is the town like planning on hiring, like SBPF had their own engineering firm to help with some of
These are
that?
Basically repeats.
Or
Okay.
is the
I mean,
town
worded a
have
little
an
differently,
entity
but-
like that to help facilitate? Maybe that goes in planning.
I would say. Case would be a part of that. I don't know. When it comes to.
so is that identify engineer or identify
Yeah.
I think
consultants?
somebody had up there who's identified.
Well, the legal consulting,
Yeah,
That
professional
one
resources.
that I put is on the ConCom's review
Oh,
side, not on the.
Ashley also
Yes,
just wrote it, town
Solution
engineer
side.
engagement.
Yeah, I mean, they need to engage with some engineering firm to assist. them.
Potential specialists, whatever, yeah.
I'm going to identify professional resources, right? Okay, that will be,
That's what I was trying to get
is
at.
that?
Town center.
I thought somebody said it, yeah, yeah.
I knew
I knew it was there, okay,
But I
there.
couldn't
I just
find
wanted
it.
to
It's
say it.
engineering, but I like.
Who
I'm
who-
reading
who are we
all of
gonna need
those.
to do this?
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, good, all right.
More?
So how about we have a structure, whether that be property owner funding, whether that be an HOA, whether that be some other type of structure. What else needs to occur during the planning process with regard to structure, do you think?
Well, community engagement.
Okay, thank you very much.
And by that, I mean beyond the stakeholders.
Okay.
Because if this is going to be utilizing town financial resources, the entire island should be able to have an opportunity to weigh in.
Capital Committee?
Yeah, and yeah,
Capital.
Capital Committee.
Eventually, yeah.
Talking about big numbers.
Look at the votes.
That's right, yeah.
Well, but community engagement will tell us that, whether it's a non-starter or not.
Well, you have to have community engagement, like I said earlier, right? Somebody else is controlling your story right now, right?
I mean, I know you have funding as a whole separate thing, but maybe before we get to like tactics of funding, in the planning step is to develop a list of all the potential funding mechanisms. Town funding is potential, grant funding is potential, neighborhood funding is potential, gift funding is a potential. So maybe we figure out what even the options are, and then we'll see which ones are feasible and which ones maybe not so much.
Well, yeah, and to actually rank them, which one seems more likely,
Prioritize.
and there may be multiple that will work, they just work at different points in time.
And I think it might be easier to get funding from some people, like once the town has a plan, it's like, oh, I can get on board with that and contribute.
I know.
Like, I think of the Hummock Pond Road bike path, it was like, once it started getting close, someone contributed like a lot of funding to that, so you can show them something solid.
So back to that question about structure. You develop a structure or a structure is created. Anything else during that planning process?
Define what you mean by structure. I'm not following you.
Well, at the end of the day, somebody has to pay, right? Like they pay for maintenance, pay for whatever else is done. And is that going to be done by establishing an HOA? Is it going to be done by having individual property owners pay for it? Is it going to be done solely by the town? In each of those scenarios, those are structure, right? That's structure. So what else might be done?
Cost estimates.
Okay.
But
That
so
would have to be
I
planning
happen to
process.
agree with Dawn, is that I don't think if this went to the town, that the town as a whole would approve of the funding.
Acknowledged.
And right.
Totally
so
acknowledged.
Then it gets us into the betterment district that Matt has been talking about, and
That's kind of why I put mine up there. You put it over in funding. To me, it's really planning.
Okay, and I'm acknowledging that, I'm just continuing to throw out just multiple scenarios, because I don't want to lead you down what is just one sole path. You're gonna get there yourselves. And if you're there right now and you wanna say to me, you believe that this is what the structure should be, and you've got concurrence, then by goodness sakes, we'll head down that path, because that saves us, some struggle time working through scenarios. I'm sorry, I was
Yeah.
the word.
So I hear Don and I hear Ian, but I don't want us to go down a super pessimistic route. And, if we market this right and do the right outreach, maybe people in the town will get behind it. And I think, like if you're gonna raise a capital campaign for a new hospital, right? You need renderings, you need justification, you need people in the community to give you testimonials. So I don't think that really happens for NOI process ever, but maybe it needs to. Even us who have been in the ConCom for a long time, I think a lot of us were even surprised at how the geotubes actually ended up looking from, you look at it in the plan and you look at it in reality and you hear justifications like, oh, you could just remove it by cutting it with a box cutter. And then you hear what we're going through with the potential removal plan. We need like visualizations and we need like a marketing package, unfortunately, for
So
this
like a
process.
communications kind of plan?
Yeah.
Oh, I
yeah.
actually put a marketing plan and strategy down here, right? Because that's absolutely, that's where.
And maybe they're right, and maybe the people in the town will never pay for it, and we'll get there.
But they'll certainly know what's going on, right? I mean, again, that's half the battle.
And it puts the action in their hands a little bit. If you want to protect Baxter Road and the access to the lighthouse, well then we pay a tax money to do that, or whatever.
So that's the thing for me, it's identifying what's island-wide value and what's local value, property owner value, right? I think that's been part of
Did you say island-wide?
island-wide value. In other words,
Yeah.
what is the larger community benefit and how is that defined? And also, if we're investing in relocating Baxter Road now, because to do it now costs less than to wait 15 years when we know it has to be done eventually, those kind of things like cost benefit analyses and who benefits, right? It's hard to hold on to the benefit of access to the lighthouse as a tourist destination or quantify it. So,
But the cost benefit isn't just, sort of where we think about it, the cost benefit is, if we don't do anything, this is gonna happen quickly and we're gonna be doing some of this stuff anyway. If we take some steps, it's, it'll cost us less. I mean, that's
Right.
sort of, if it shows that, that's the part of the cost benefit. What we were calling it, I think, was a coastal resiliency district. So that kind of covers, whether it's a betterment or a special, project district or whatever it is. And I don't think it's gonna be, I don't think it should be optional. I think we should ask the people and X amount of the people should sign on board, or we shouldn't even bother. And, I think it should just be, and that's, so upfront, I
Yeah.
think, is we want to get buy-in from that district. No matter if it's Baxter Road or Mattakit or Grant Point, the town can do a few takings or a few things, but most of it should be done cooperatively. And if it isn't, then good luck to you. But and I think there should be enough of an explanation that these are the things that are acceptable, and this is our short, medium, long-term plan, and sign on or not. In a nice way, not like that. But
No,
Okay, so following along the lines of the market plan and strategy and renderings, what about the development of a few shovel-ready projects kind of thing and work that into the development of the plan? And then it could actually be used as part of the marketing strategy?
You mean like shovel-ready alternatives? That sounds great.
Okay.
I don't know if I understand it.
I think she means like in reach one, we could possibly do an alternative like a geotube, or we could do another alternative like a fringe marsh, or we could do an alternative like a dune restoration here. Here's what all those look like. Here's the cost of those things. Here's the efficacy of those things based on the storms that might happen there. And then people can see what those things really are.
That was the thing I liked about that November NOI that was issued. Really had a lot of options in there, how things would change as the situation changed.
That was in that NOI, they went through that. And this isn't something that should happen at town meeting or,
Yeah.
Public opinion. This is something that we need professional advice for. This will work until it doesn't, and this is when, and we here at this table, I don't think, can tell you what the triggers are. We can give you ideas, but we need help on this,
And I agree with the point you made. I put down form an HOA they've got to form an HOA if they want to protect their property. And if not, good luck.
Yeah, Matt, you summed it up pretty well towards the end of the last meeting, but I see it, the majority of the buy-in comes from the Wisconsin community,
Mhm.
and, you know, we get the rest where we can.
So then maybe one of the steps in the planning process is actually one-on-one homeowner concerns. You know, almost like one-on-one meetings with the homeowners, property owners. And to discuss their concerns, timing,
And
whole
contribution.
process, and their contribution.
I just worry, it's like, I agree, we need to talk about all the stakeholders, but if you think of like island-wide, and if this is kind of a model for island-wide, there is no way it's feasible to talk to like.
I'm talking about one-on-one, the homeowners along Baxter Road. And then you have your next project and there may be, you know,
Right, I just wonder like the reality of actually being able to interface one-on-one with all those individuals.
And you said Baxter Road.
The
We
staff
actually-
does that
I was about to say,
already.
Vince is doing,
Yeah.
kind of doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're actually doing that
Unfortunately.
already on the Baxter Road relocation planning design project right now.
Could have.
But Ashley said another thing, which was, again, the town-wide input. So we're hearing that a couple times. So we're hearing both town-wide input, Baxter Road input. Because they want to gauge the whole town.
Yeah, and this is why I think it's so important for us to get into geographic extent, because we're saying Baxter Road a lot here, and maybe they're at the front line, but Wisconsin is all the way from Blow Beach to Hoyks Hollow out to, the water tower, or even further, some people say.
Did you give me I think a couple of you
Yeah,
gave me
I said-
a post-it about the geographic extent.
I said in pre-planning, but if we're gonna talk to individual homeowners, we need to do that as the first thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely number one thing, because that will make it seem, okay, is this an actual feasible thing, or are we way outside the extent of possibility?
Don't you think the current group that exists, the leadership of that group can give us input for a lot of the people that live along?
No,
I
Road?
actually disagree. I think we're hearing from people that we've not heard from before, who feel vested in this. They're stating that they're vested, they're supporting the maintenance of the maintaining of the geotubes, and I think a new crop of people are engaged and wanting to investigate what role they could play in this, or we need to explain to them what role they need to play in this beyond writing a letter saying, keep the geotubes, that there is going to require financial investment, probably beyond the immediate bluffside property owners. There are people who value buying time, I believe, even if their property itself is not directly at risk.
Okay.
And if there aren't, then I'm not sure this is financially viable.
Is there anything there?
I would-
Is
go
there
ahead.
anything there that you want to capture on a Post-it note? Or that hasn't already been captured on a Post-it note?
In my mind, it's concentric rings of impact and identifying sort of like what different types of roles people might play in making this
Okay.
work.
Can you capture that
Yeah.
for me? Okay. 1, 2, Matt, 3. Was there anybody else? No? Yeah, okay. 1.
I would think that if the town and the Conservation Commission can agree on an NOI to some extent,
Mhm.
whatever it might be, get that approved, and then we can go to the stakeholders and say, here's the plan, we can't afford it as a town.
Okay.
We can do a variety of funding, like Matt said, what do you call it, Matt? Assessing homeowners,
Betterment District.
Betterment District,
District of Critical Planning.
yeah, or just say you live on Baxter Road, you gotta help us here, and there are people there that probably can write checks.
Okay, so we already have on the Post-it notes that we need to bring that NOI back. We need to revise that NOI. We need to work together as a group to develop it to a point that it can be approved, right? Work together to get it to a point that it can be approved and then move through that. So
I really
do I need to capture anything new on Post-it notes? Because those are there. Okay. Well, just a minute. 1,
Yes, my point is, if they don't agree to funding this thing, it's a dead project, and you can put that in writing.
Well, we'll put that on a post-it note when we get to funding.
DOA.
All right, Matt?
But when I put on the district, instead of talking about Baxter, talk about Grant Point.
Sure.
If we were doing Grant Point, it would be easy to know who's involved in Grant Point, because it ends at the Bluff of Cliff Road, and it ends up at, you look at the lines of where the, sea level is gonna rise and where the storm tide is gonna be, and you would include everybody in that area.
Right.
What's a little harder here, you can look at some of those lines on maps and kind of see where the, where the bluff can go and everything, but it's not necessarily a flooding issue, but it is gonna be a, sort of a loss of land.
An erosion.
So an erosion issue, so, so you have to sort of look at it differently. I think everybody downtown can pay the same thing in a way, and the people on the front row might have to take care of their own bulkheads or, living shorelines or whatever happens there. But on this one, the people here closest should pay more, and the people in the back should pay less. You have to figure out.
Oftentimes how
funding.
stormwater is managed in, towns and cities where you're not dealing with the issue you are here, right? The entire downtown is impacted, or the central business district is impacted by storm, right? Just basic stormwater. So everyone pays there, but then when you are in specific areas, you actually pay more.
Yeah.
Right,
So I heard for a planning activity from Matt, methodology for defining the
yeah, and
district.
well, and we had that already up here also as determine the geographic parameters
Okay,
of
'cause
each project.
somebody
So,
brought up earlier, it might have been Ashley, I forget who it was, but that, this is an opportunity to set a precedent for how you work through this.
Right.
So
yes, we talked about that last time.
Okay.
Okay. Anything, did I?
Yes.
Yes, Ian.
So, well, there are two things, but I mean, first of all, I think Brooke absolutely hit the nail on the head that, you have to have a certain amount of money that you want a betterment district to buy into.
Mhm.
And my understanding from people in Sconset is that, as you say, it is controversial. There are people in Sconset who say, we don't want, it's not our problem. And so I don't know how that would actually
Yeah.
play out, in fact.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the other thing is that we still have on our hands, for us, ConCom, as a regulatory body, we have a failed project with a massive sand deficit. And I don't see how we can just ignore that. And we seem to be doing that in a sense. We're talking about going forward without dealing with this reality on the ground and how we can deal with it without making a mockery of environmental regulations. So, and that is a concern for me here.
Okay, got it. All right, I'm writing that
So
down.
under
Okay,
planning,
so
that's
I'm gonna move.
corrective, you're asking sort of a correction plan or what?
I would, yes, I am really.
That's the
And that's,
enforcement order.
yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to add enforcement order at the bottom?
I was gonna group it with the NOI. Okay, all right, so we're gonna move on, okay? We're gonna move on to agreements. Now we're in this space where we've done our pre-planning. We've worked to put together a plan for moving forward. And during that planning process, right, we're going to address the need for agreements. So when we get into that space, what do we need to talk about? So again, 5 minutes, right? Put it on a Post-it note, right? We're gonna do 5 minutes of just your thoughts captured on a Post-it note and on Post-it notes, and then we'll talk through. This is on agreements.
Does anyone need to see a figure? I can't see it.
And-
Do you want me to move one over there?
And by agreements, are we talking about like specific things like easements or a road relocation plan is agreed upon?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
Yep, both of them. We're talking about, revising memorandums of understanding that may be older, new agreements, new easements. I I added the word commitment to your second funding. Okay. Anybody ready? Let's see. Contractor hired to construct, maintain new roadway, etc. Entity, town, question mark, agreeing to follow an order of conditions set out in NOI. Process, NOI process. SBPF abandoning the process, go directly to the new stakeholders. The whole holders need to be determined, stakeholders need to be determined. Really should just put my reading glasses on.
They knew better.
No, okay. Any others? Let's see, get a plan in place for Baxter. Select board has contact for new NOI.
Correct.
Oh, select board has contact.
That's the contract.
Oh, okay, there's no R.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. I'm like, that one wasn't my reading glasses.
Little
For new
dyslexia.
NOI, okay, very good. Get a plan in place for Baxter Road. Agree to compromise, no stakeholder will be 100% behind any plan. No. We're gonna have to agree to how much work everyone will compromise. How to get community buy-in on different levels, sponsored, overall community and beyond. Okay.
Bunch of East Enders surveyors.
Commitment
I can give
from
you some stories that I've
those
heard.
impacted to agree to betterments and SBPF removal, funding transferred to new responsible party, okay? Revise, honor existing MOUs, okay? I'll keep that. Oh, you could do that. Thank you.
This is when there's a
Okay,
novel.
Dawn.
I'm not even remembering all.
Dawn, easements, permits, HOA, revised MOU. Contracted bluff, sorry, continued bluff protection.
That would be an
and
agreement between the two.
Okay.
parties.
Oh, okay. And future
If
retreat
that's
planning.
Okay,
so
regulatorily allowed,
that's,
I'm not sure. it
that's
is,
the
but-
first I've heard, like, not just today, tomorrow, next year, but like out past the arrow. And we're gonna put that on a separate sticky, Dawn, okay, because that is, you know, future retreat planning is certainly something that needs to be addressed. List of acceptable engineering solutions for expanded NOI,
This is,
sand delivery,
this is an if or, it has to stay together.
find sand source,
You want to give them,
I'll explain.
what is
but-
failure and what is success?
That's like triggers, that's kind of.
Yep,
what
that's
Don's
your
talking about.
triggers,
It's like this.
absolutely, triggers.
If Or-
Public access,
okay.
that logic makes sense.
right to enter private properties, that would be those easements.
Yeah, but it's also, it's more than the easements, we're having trouble now monitoring because it's not cooperative any longer. People that used to let vents on their property are, we're not sure what
They're
used to be
not
going
now.
on there, so
Okay,
if we're gonna do anything.
Is that a tradition matter or is that a deed restriction?
Well, it becomes a liability issue, a bunch of legal issues, and so it's not when it was cooperative, everything's fine, you can go measure. When it's not, you're sort of back. So we need something that says you're allowed to go
you're
on,
allowed to go.
no matter what, to do what you have to do.
Yeah.
They have to sign something. There's also, I have a hold
Hold
harmless.
harmless, that's what he wrote,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's basically that if the town goes through and does all this, we're not gonna, we wanna have somebody sign that they aren't gonna come back later and sue the town and and oppose takings and oppose a whole bunch of other things. They have to give those rights up for this to happen.
Okay, and then we have new OOC for current project. Old one is expired, or if actualization of removal order, removal enforcement order. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, so the current project that exists today, the order of conditions for the permit has expired.
Mhm.
So if they came to get a certificate of compliance, they couldn't get a certificate of compliance. So if that project wants to remain before there's a time to create a new NOI, we either need a new NOI that would create a new order of conditions of that project, or we need to have that project removed through the enforcement order that exists.
Do you think that's gonna happen in planning?
Well, it
Yeah,
has
it
to
might
be
direct the
Happen
planning,
before the plan?
might be in the pre-plan.
Yeah. That's, okay. Do you mind if I?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay.
Tanya, did we want to acknowledge
Yes,
that?
yep,
we
I
have
will
another-
do that.
I'm sorry if that's confusing.
No,
but
that is not
one of those
confusing.
two things need to happen because
Yes.
currently as the project sits, it doesn't have an active order of conditions and it can't get a certificate of
And
compliance
am I correct? It
Okay.
doesn't have an active MOU with you guys either,
or an active license, I don't think. either.
license, yeah, so it's.
I think there's maybe an MOU, but the license is expired.
All right. So, we have, Linda, yes?
Yep.
Yeah, Linda has joined us, for the meeting, so.
I was
for-
downstairs at the HCC meeting and I have to go back to.
Okay, so yes, so she's has two meetings going on at the same time, in order to. She'll be taking care of both of those, so she'll be coming and going. I'm talking to the owl here. Okay.
She's letting them
Another
know.
owl.
Yeah, she's letting the
I'm
public
talking
know.
to the owl like it's turning into a person
I'm
here.
used to this owl.
Okay, anyone have anything else that they'd like to capture in agreements? Because if not, we're gonna move to funding, and then we're going to start putting timelines on some of these things so that we can capture them in order, okay? So 5 minutes or less, let's talk about funding. Those types of things that need to be built on, right? If we mentioned it over here in planning, how do we need to build on it to get to funding?
And everybody's been winning a lot on scratch tickets lately. We can all start buying
Just
scratch
go buy
beads.
bricks, right? Bricks and scratch offs. Don't we wish? Major funding for Baxter residents. Okay. Federal grant money,
Federal and state. money.
federal and state grant.
Yeah, there's certain like. coastal resiliency
Betterment
things.
HOA, town capital committee. I got that.
Get the R in.
There, yeah, you gave me the R that time, I was good. Thank you, okay. Policy, those that it benefits pays, okay? If people want to voluntarily contribute, who do they contribute to? A legal analysis of betterments. And donations, betterments, grants, override, is that what that,
Yes,
okay, override. And enhance town's ability to seek grants, staff betterments, amendments, etc. Okay.
I understand.
I don't think it's a realistic one, but.
Yeah,
I'd say
there's
it's
the same back and
The
forth.
break, the breakdown percentage of grants, betterments in the taxpayer foundation.
Okay. What about in funding? We ask for money, we make a plea. What about,
On there.
what about who's going to go after the money? I mean,
They show up at that early.
going after state and federal grant dollars takes a significant effort. That is a lot of time. Depending on the amount that you're looking for, it's a full-time job.
Yeah, that's why I put in mine
Oh, did you
enhanced
capture
town of
your-
Nantucket's ability to seek grants through staffing, budgetary amendments, anything else that might be required. It's that pink one to the right. the
Oh,
Batman
there,
area.
okay, all right, good. Create community fund for donations. And town has obligation to provide access override. Okay, is that- okay,
A toll road.
whole road. You
I
know,
had one
You would,
suggested
well, you'd assess
me.
the value of visiting the lighthouse by how many people are willing to actually pay that fee. I mean, it's just.
Is that what you mean by access override?
That's my,
Yeah.
that means the town has an obligation to provide access and there's infrastructure, plumbing, sewer, electrical. It's a town road. We have an obligation to provide access. And given the funding or lack thereof, the only way, I agree with, I think Don said, an override may be the only way to do it because the town has that obligation. We can't just say, well, screw you, let them fall over the cliff and no road. Because that's not something that the municipality should just say, go ahead, whatever.
okay. I don't know who tongue in cheek said toll road, because I kind of heard you.
I mean,
Okay.
I did.
Well, it's tongue in cheek though, I mean, I put it up there, because sometimes, we make those off the top of our head comments. And it takes us into a different state, it takes us kind of in a different state of ideating, right, of idea creation. So something could potentially come of it, right, so we keep it there, we capture it and say, you know what, let's revisit some modification of that, right, so I'm all in favor of putting the unicorns on the board.
I put up nonprofit, form a nonprofit. Part of the reason for that, it's not just money, is some of these houses could be donating the land underlying, they could be donating with a life right, they'd have appraisals, and they would get tax benefits now. And then when the triggers happen, this would go to the nonprofit, would go to the conservation foundation, et cetera, and they could have substantial benefit.
Read
So there's things like
read
that
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 one.
we could be working toward.
Explore conservation or historic restrictions.
So it's the same
Yeah.
thing, like if somebody over here was willing to voluntarily move their house and then an organization would pay to purchase the development rights and put a conservation restriction on that property, then they would maybe be willing to use that money to help the rest of the planning process.
And we're seeing, I mean, that's what we're seeing on Washington Street, like a lot of buyout for the land bank, moving those homes out of flooding.
Okay, and then I have one here, create property transfer sales tax on properties above $5 million for fund dedicated to dealing with sea level rise.
After we solve housing, everybody.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Well,
trying to
I
get
think
up
it
on
goes,
that
so.
one. We already have one up
But
there.
yeah, I
I'm
really,
trying
Transfer fees.
for another.
hard to
Yes,
get.
no, we,
California is dealing with
it-
it.
but, time out
Yeah, I
though.
do.
I mean, the idea is to capture it all, right?
No, I get it.
Yeah, because the moment we say it can't be done, that's when idea creation stops. Because everyone's brain heard can't, and then it doesn't work anymore, right? It doesn't go any further.
So I'll put, when we get the tax transfer fee for housing and we've solved the housing crisis, we can transfer that money to this
There you go.
instead.
All right,
That will be never.
now.
Oh, Joe.
No,
Mr.
never,
Negative.
no and never, no, not allowed, not allowed.
Joe.
Okay,
No.
a couple more comments, and because then I wanna move these over there, and over there, you'll continue to build on them, right? So,
So I have one thing that I'm not exactly sure where it goes.
great,
But so like in other states, especially in Hawaii, they have taken this tactic that homeowners and the municipalities there agree to a set length term for a coastal engineering structure. And then after that term, they give up the rights to maintain, repair, rebuild that structure. So essentially gives you a planning window to do something else. So in Hawaii, there's like all these seawalls that have 10-year planning rights. And it then becomes upon the homeowner to take that 10 years and decide, do we want to sell this property? Do we want to move our house? Do we want to go to nature-based solutions? Do we want to do whatever? So I think that could be a mechanism where, you know, how we are predicting projects here are sort of in perpetuity, but maybe some of these projects are purposefully meant to be temporary.
To incentivize alternative planning.
To incentivize retreat,
Yeah.
usually, but to incentivize, yeah, long-term alternative planning.
Okay, so now we're gonna start moving between here and the other side of the room. Very quickly, right? We wanna move these because once they're there, they're not put on with crazy glue, right? We can pull them right back off and move them to someplace else. So I'm gonna go through these pre-planning. Now, would you all envision pre-planning occurring in the first 6 months?
Sure should.
3 months?
Yes.
90 days, 6 months?
6 months anyway,
Yeah.
they have to
6 months?
redo all those
6 months?
easements.
Okay, all right, so then we're talking about all of these pre-planning related activities to occur between today and 6 months from now. So as I give them, Jen, as I read them off, you wanna put them on.
Yep.
Engage the entire town. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months.
Vince is gonna be busy.
Minimum of 6 months.
6 months,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, but, when are we gonna start it?
Today,
Okay,
tomorrow.
so,
It's already started.
all right, so that one goes on today. Good, we can move them, right?
I
one
did have
on-
one logistical question that came up with something Ashley said. If things that come up in here are already ongoing, can we put them to the left of the map or no?
Sure, we can put them anywhere you'd like.
Okay.
To the left, top, bottom, yeah, everywhere. Absolutely. So if they're ongoing, we'll put them on the left, but make sure that they're really ongoing,
Mhm,
not
yeah.
started and not finished, right? Okay, so one-on-one homeowner concerns, one-on-one homeowner concerns.
3 months.
2 months, 30 days, 60 days?
Well, I
Did you say 60
I
days?
said 3 months. but
3 months, okay,
that's
here,
fine.
Jen. So somewhere to the right of 60 days.
Well, and somebody already said Vince is already doing that.
Yeah.
So that's happening today.
It's ongoing.
Because we just
Okay,
saved
put it on today.
So well, okay.
Are we
I
ignoring
see that as
staffing issues?
proactive rather than reactive.
Oh,
So
we
a
can write that on there.
proactive
one-on-one
individual
homeowner.
homeowner engagement.
Okay, so maybe
Versus-
we put that out
Post
at
it.
60 or 90
Say
days.
Vince
proactive.
responding to
I'm just gonna
emails.
add to it.
And then put it at 90 days.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like a
Did you
plan.
say 60 days?
Outreach.
60 days?
60 days.
Okay, 60 days, Jen.
Adding proactive.
Proactive,
Yeah.
define geographic extent,
Today or in the next week.
okay?
As
So-
soon as
As
possible.
soon as possible.
Yeah, somewhere between today and 30 days. Okay? Geographic parameters, we already did. Determine who plans, and then I also have 3 parties, the select board, the conservation commission, and right now Baxter residents, but that's only one project.
And the
right?
planning board.
Well, they weren't identified during the
So
study.
is it gonna take
Planning
place-
board added to it?
Where you're gonna have zoning issues. The
I-
planning board's involved, they're all over this. And so is the zoning board of appeals.
Understood. You want to add it to the Post-it note?
Yeah.
Okay,
Because I haven't
I can
been
do
on
it when
both
I
of
put
we
it
them.
up.
added that over there, okay.
What's its time frame?
We need to determine first who is planning, and then we're having a Post-it list note of people who we feel who will be on that list. So
But it might be different.
For each board,
Time
it's
for
different.
each one, it's gonna be different, right?
Yeah.
Like, these are Post-it notes on a wall, they're a guide, right? There's gonna be, there's gonna be real ink on real paper that is the plan, right?
Can you remind me of yours, when we started or when we want?
This is when this needs to begin, right?
Yeah,
This
okay.
needs to begin, yes. So decide who plans.
Well, the planning board, when I was the chairman, we went after those easements. For
30
people
days.
from Pulpus Road.
30 days.
So that's something that has to be redone because they all expired in March 6th.
It is all redone, but for the purposes of this, of what we're talking about right here,
That's
it's,
pre-planning.
it is, and who is the group? Because like right now, this conversation is between the Conservation Commission and the Select Board and the staff. Who else needs to be engaged in that conversation? You added
Planning
zoning,
and zoning.
planning and zoning, okay, yeah.
But then
Let's
do we
see.
need to also have like a separate, because like everyone's involved today, but then we're gonna kind of separate out where the ConCom might not be involved again until we're doing pre-NOI meetings.
Absolutely, and that's all gonna
So-
come out in the final plan, right? When a final plan is developed, that final plan is going to say, when we have these types of situations, this is who the recommended team of the planning team is. When we have these situations, this is who the recommended planning team is.
Can I
So-
ask for clarification? This sticky note is making the list of who needs to be in the planning process,
That's
right? That's
Yes.
what's being done today.
That's what's being done.
Yeah, not when they're involved,
That's
that
right.
they are involved.
That they are involved.
I would very respectfully request that we keep the yellow one and then we don't put the green one on the chart for now, because this is tactics, right? That green is getting into implementation of
Perfect.
how we're gonna do the yellow one already. So
Anybody
put it
disagree with
underneath
that?
that.
Okay, all right.
I like that.
Address the topic of past sand deficit by the SBPF.
And that's gonna, I think that's gonna be a pretty important one to
Now.
When?
break the backlog of where we're going.
So that goes
When do we
with
start?
Seth's
Yeah,
new order
now.
of conditions, right?
I guess addressed by who also is.
Right.
The long, the
Where-
long pink one?
Yeah, I mean.
Seth-
different
And Seth's
avenues.
plan for new order of conditions.
Isn't that kind of all
It's all
together?
tied
All
together.
Yeah.
It's all
And this
related
is,
to
you
the
know, this is
current,
a process.
current project.
It's letter writing, it's sitting down and reviewing what was there, what needs to be in the new letter.
A lot of staff issues here we're talking about. We don't have.
It's all figuring out how do we deal with the messiness of the
Right.
current project while trying to free ourselves up.
That
for
needs
Yeah.
to be
the
started
future.
Now.
Now,
30 days from now.
Now.
No, today or yesterday.
I think
In the
I
middle of it.
personally think with
Yesterday.
sand.
Yesterday.
Okay. Alrighty. Methodology for defining the district. Was that the geographic parameters? It's all the same thing, right? Okay. Define planning partners and stakeholders. Maybe that goes with the yellow one,
Yeah.
right? That's a better way to
So-
capture the yellow on top of the yellow one. Review NOI plan, revive NOI. Identify ongoing legal, technical, and regulatory assistance for NOI process.
Right now.
This is all for the new, let's just call it expanded NOI at this
Yeah.
point. So
Yep,
Now, 30 days.
30
30
days, I
days.
think, 30 to 60 days.
let's put that one in 60 days.
It takes time.
It takes time to pull people
Yeah,
together.
that's
right?
even more
Yeah.
6 months.
Even an email takes time. Remedy for failed project.
That goes
that
with the
goes
That's,
the-
that's with all
yeah,
that.
That's all
long
with the
pink
big,
one.
big
Okay.
long.
All right. Make up the current sand deficit.
Right in that one.
Big,
That's all
big
part
long
of that
study.
one.
We
Okay,
can
so
probably
this is
combine all
that big,
these
long
two.
stack.
Current project concerns being what.
Today. Let's go with that big long list of today. Determine town staff needed and capacity additional consultants needed. Probably within the next 30 to 60 days, right? So
Well, to
put
get
that,
this, that's gonna have to be within 30 to get some of this stuff done.
this is determined that you need it
Understood.
and agree that you need it. And then start taking the steps to put it in motion. So 45 to 60 days,
Sooner, because some of the
Yeah,
things we're
sooner.
asking, some of the things we're asking for
30 days,
in 30 days aren't gonna get done unless there's someone to do it.
okay?
And so, and especially if SPPF isn't
Well,
involved.
and that's what, and
I
and
think-
that's.
And I'm
what-
not trying to be
well,
negative, I'm
No,
just
no, no,
saying.
you're not
they-
being negative at
Right.
all, Matt. Once
a
you
whole new
all see
thing.
them, we're gonna take like 10 minutes and you're gonna go over there and you're gonna look at them and say, gotta flip flop these, okay?
I
All
agree
right, let's
totally
keep
though.
moving because it's already 10 after 6.
Yeah.
Identify necessary permitting and licensing. Matt.
That goes into the new expanded NOI process.
Okay, identify how adaptation meets and fits into goals of the CRP. See, I think these are all pieces and parts of the actual plan, right? So determine when it is that you want to have a new plan,
Like
right?
a new NOI,
A new,
Application.
because I think that's honestly more like 6 months out. 60 days is not realistic for
for
that.
the new NOI.
Not, I don't think so even at
Yeah.
all.
I don't even,
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that I think 6 months is realistic.
Yeah,
I would have put that at 1 year.
Yeah,
Well, this is when we're starting the process, or this is when we'll have the document?
It's the starting point.
It's starting the
Starting point
process,
is like
I don't think
now,
we'll even be starting a new NOI in 60
for
days.
60 days.
maybe not 60 days, but less than a year, hopefully.
Yeah, put it 6
Maybe
months.
6 months from now.
Put it in 6
Yeah.
months.
6
Yeah.
months, okay. So how adaptation meets and fits into the goal of the CRP, identify necessary permitting and licensing, that's all part of that NOI?
So we've got two things. We've got the NOI for what's gonna happen on the bluff, and then there's the planning for the
Yes.
relocation of Baxter Road, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
like, this is a bit more comprehensive than just the NOI.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
the adaptation
So-
thing is separate. You know, we in this room and at the last meeting, we discussed that we want to take scenario 2 adaptation. But we need to not do things arbitrarily. We need to make sure that our decisions here also fit in with the goals for all of coastal
Right.
resiliency for Nantucket. And that we're using adaptation pathways that are gonna be a model for other areas of the island. But that's not related to the NOI, that's related to the community and even island-wide scope.
Right.
Right, I think that NOI probably in order to be successful should address road relocation within that in a lot of ways.
So can we put a Post-it note for new NOI at somewhere between the 6 months and a year?
I think a year is more realistic.
To begin it though.
A year would probably be when it's getting filed, would
I'd
be
say
my
6 months.
assumption, maybe 6 months to be
6
beginning
months.
it.
Yeah.
and Working on it in earnest.
Can I ask a question to staff? The previous NOI that was submitted and then ultimately withdrawn, that took like, what, 8 or 9 months to plan that process or more?
A little longer because it was done in 2 phases. There was an initial phase in kind of like January to May, rough timeframe, 2022. Then it was revived between September and November. So roughly speaking, 7, 8 months.
And they started
So,
that
yeah.
even with some of the work group planning we've done the previous fall. Before that, we started talking about reaches, et cetera. So it was.
Put it maybe just shy of a year.
Well, the only
Hope for the
thing about
best.
that is, Seth, is that they already have all that information, they withdrew it, so they already have probably the guts of it. So they won't have to start from zero, because they already have an idea, so I don't think it's gonna take them 6 months to put it back in, because they've already fleshed out a lot of what they had put in the first time. So I think 6 months is probably reasonable, but I think they're not starting from zero, they're not reinventing that wheel, they already have it.
No, but if you're talking here, we're talking not only, we're talking about the town dealing not only with an NOI before ConCom, but also in terms of moving the road.
All the easements have to be redone.
For us, for
that
the
property's been
Conservation
sold and
Commission,
that's
excuse me,
problem.
let me finish, please. For the Conservation Commission, our purview is only within 100 feet of the resource area. And so much of the road, especially in the expanded one, is beyond our purview, so.
Okay,
There's a fair
So-
amount of little wetlands in there, so.
well, no, so,
That's
okay, right now, now you're getting into the tactical discussions of what you're going to probably see in the NOI and what you're going to be doing with the NOI. We don't need to go there tonight. What we really need to do is agree on that date for the new NOI. Is the expectation that it will be filed within a year?
Yes.
Give me a Post-it note for new NOI filed. I'll write a Post-it note for new NOI filed and put that at 1 year. Okay, all right.
sorry to make this process hard, but
You're not.
that's assuming that somebody is going to actually pay for the engineering needed for this NOI, which is a considerable amount of money on a project like that. I mean, the permitting fees are exempt, but to do all the engineering
Yes,
and drawing and visualization, right now, I don't
I
think
think the town's
Yes.
aware of that,
a process.
right? I mean, I think the town's aware of that. Right? Yeah, okay.
But where doesn't mean funded.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I, no, I said aware.
Done,
And like,
but-
They aren't nodding their heads. Right.
That's,
Butters would provide funding if they
That-
were.
yeah, that's why I can't tell you when I think it'll be submitted, but I can tell you, I think the process could be started, 6 months to a year from now, and part of that process is how we're gonna figure out how to actually write this thing.
Right.
We're not gonna do it
So
ourselves.
you're thinking that it should go out further than a year?
We thought you guys were gonna write that.
You think it should go out further than a year?
I think,
Very funny. Bill.
I think in a theoretical world, the planning could happen within the year. But I am very skeptical that the actual submission of the finalized notice of intent, which is probably gonna be hundreds of pages with technical engineering, visualization, it's gonna be one of the biggest NOIs you've ever reviewed, one of the hardest NOIs to create for the
So,
applicant. It's gonna take a long
so
time to do
what
that.
if at 1 year, we say you've got a roadmap for the new NOI?
That sounds
Okay.
fine.
And then at 2 years, you have the NOI? Okay,
I just worry like
That's too
what
long.
is
That's
happening
too
in
long.
this location in the interim with a
Yeah.
project that
Yeah.
has nobody to manage it.
That's
Like
too
that, the
That's what-
geotubes are likely coming out, given the current scenario, so I worry about a 2-year wait.
I do too. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Right.
Or not.
And
18
when it
months.
hits 25 feet, we're taking the road, we're starting to move the road. I mean, it's sort of, we can't mess around too long.
18 months?
1 year.
Again, this is,
1 year.
this
18 months now.
conversation
I
is,
think we could get an NOI in front of us within a year,
Yeah.
using the structure of the one that was pulled. If we get an engineer in there to work on a little bit more with the alternatives that, like, some of the compromise aspects that maybe weren't in there. But I think it's doable to submit within a year if, that's the direction the town's going, getting an engineer hired right away to dig in.
okay, so roadmap for a new NOI in 6 months, new NOI filed in 1 year. Now, give me an estimated time frame for approving it.
I mean, it depends on how much front loading we do with maybe pre-meetings, but I'd
Mhm.
say
Lots, assume lots.
4 to 6 months, depending on.
Okay,
Just because it's a big enough NOI, it tends to go on special meetings, there is enough public input, that's been the.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, range with the projects this large.
okay. Does anyone have issue with that being too long?
I mean, I think we're gonna be looking at the order of conditions for the existing project, and there's gonna be a decision, and we're gonna, that's on our today list. So some of that
Yep.
might be resolved to by the time. It will have to be resolved to by the time,
All right,
right?
so let's move past this, accept those dates for where they are right now and then adjust them if we need to. Okay, here you go, Jen. I'm gonna go back up here. Now, we had this big, long string of marketing related activities that we knew needed to be done, right? So all of those renderings and communications out to the general public and buy-in from the district. It's the development of a marketing plan and a marketing strategy. When do you need it? When do you need to begin it?
I think it'd be great to begin as soon as possible because you're gonna need community buy-in to get funding for the project, but the problem is you need some money to make money. I mean, this is why people in business that are already rich get richer because they have funds to use on capital to support their goals.
Okay, so I don't think that it's realistic to put a marketing strategy in the next 30 days. I think in the next 30 days, you could say, this is what we agree we need. And then you determine whether or not you have the skill sets internally to develop it, or if you have to bring somebody on board to help you. And if you have to bring somebody on board to help you, then it's gonna take you 60 days to, right, get that, for 60, 90 days for a kickoff meeting.
And like get a
Um,
quick hit for college interns. Are you dreaming?
WPI projects.
Yeah.
WP
So Jen, let's put
WPI
that out at
projects.
60 days.
They've done it for planning.
Okay, so let's see. Development list of funding sources, complete longshore settlement transport study, determine acceptable actions, have all existing data and reports reviewed by a third party, cost benefit analysis, sand sourcing, cost estimates, maintenance plan development, plan homeowners and, plan with the homeowners of the cities agrees to the terms and after the terms. Oh, that's that Hawaii example. So I think all of these activities that I just read, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think those are all pieces and parts of the new plan, right? Okay, so now the question is, when should the new plan start? The development of the new plan.
6.
Is this the new NOI?
No, the new NOI we've already got up there. This is all stuff that would be in a plan for how you're going to manage these types of activities moving forward.
Community involvement, you mean? Is that what you're talking about?
It's like a feasibility report.
Yeah, everything, how you, with any future areas around the island that may need this type of addressing.
A lot.
What is, yes, so what is the, you have to have a plan for how you're going to address those.
Well, we already have the Arcadis Coastal Resiliency Plan that came in, last
Yes.
fall
Does the coastal resilience plan,
for the entire island. But the
Yes,
one
but-
thing it was missing, not that I wish to interrupt you, is cost. There was no cost analysis on it. So,
Mhm.
which is one of the elephants in the room for all of us.
Yeah, for anything you do up on that board, there's a cost analysis that has to take place. I don't care where you put them. I don't care how many you put up there. It's all gonna come down to cost.
Are you talking about a decision, a methodology for decision-making? Is that what?
yeah,
You're
yeah, it's just
crafting a
as
method.
a plan for moving forward. How are you going to, what is your plan and strategy or the method that you're going to use to engage the community in that area? What's the methodology that you're going to use for, future marketing on something new? What were the other ones?
And Ian's point is well taken, is that the town has already identified a lot of different priorities and areas and projects for resiliency. So it could serve as sort of the first implementation model.
I mean, I look at identify a sand source, right? If we don't have a sand source, maintaining the existing GO2 becomes a non-starter, right?
Right.
So it is about feasibility too, of this, of scenario 2. Is it even feasible?
Without the sand source.
Yeah, I mean, some of these things need to be done before an NOI process, the sand source, the.
Okay, then let's break them back apart.
Yeah.
Jen,
got too
go
many
ahead, you
things
break
on.
them back apart and we'll
Exactly.
just put them up there in 30, 60, 90 days. All right, or more.
Homeowners in city agree to term and after term.
Oh, that's the Hawaii example.
That's a later
Let's say
thing,
that, can put that over on the key takeaways page.
Okay.
Because that's an example of something that could be done.
Maintenance plan development.
Oh, that's part of that
Of what?
long one on the left.
Maintenance
The
of
current
what?
GO2s.
Okay.
All right, that's now.
Yeah,
Okay.
that one just falling.
Yep. Develop list of funding sources. Develop list of funding
Gotta
sources
start now.
Funding sources for what?
for what you're gonna do
For all of it.
to maintain.
Yeah, let's get that
30
going.
days.
Yeah, 30 days.
30 days.
Yeah, we gotta start talking now.
Plenty of money out there.
But I mean, some of the
Unless you're
funding
looking
sources
for it.
might change too.
Complete longshore sediment transport study.
Be a while. That's gonna be a while.
That's.
It would be
fine.
great to have that before the NOI, but I know we're not going to have it, so
That's
it's
our
gonna go
business.
into the future planning, maybe 2 or 3 years. That will allow us a better. plan for the
Determine
future.
acceptable actions. Is that part of this one?
Probably. You gotta come up with a plan.
Have all existing data and reports reviewed by third party. That's this one, right? You're on the existing, no?
60 days.
I think 60 days.
So I just heard twice, you gotta come up with a plan. But then when I had a long list of Post-it notes that are part of the plan, then people were questioning what plan?
I'm just talking about what direction, instead of everybody sitting around at the table saying, well, I think that works, I think that works, I think that works. I think we need to figure out, are we gonna move the road or not move the road? Are we gonna keep the geotubes, not keep the geotubes? We can do all this fancy stuff with these Post-it notes, but that's where the rubber meets the road. We're gonna have to go after those easements again to move the road. We're gonna have to deal with the infrastructure. We're gonna have to deal with the historic resources, which are those structures. And we're gonna have to deal with does the geotube stay or go, or does it expand? Very simple, very elementary. They have all of these other collateral things that make them happen or not happen. But those are the decisions that have to be made. Which direction do we want to go in?
And those points that you've made, capture them and put, 30 days, 60 days, 90, 6 months or a year, and we'll work them into the timeline. If you don't feel that they've already been captured and it's something that needs to be done, then you need to capture it.
So
I think we
So
need-
I heard you
I think we need
say
clarification.
Baxter Road relocation, right?
Those
Plans.
don't show up.
Oh, they don't show up.
Yeah, I think we need a clarification because we're talking about multiple different plans at the same time.
Right.
So there's an overall strategy for the future resiliency of Wisconsin.
In or out.
That could have any amount of things in it. And then there's specific things like NOI, which is an action that will help progress that strategy. There's things we need to plan for the NOI, to be able to have the technical expertise and engineering and all that to actually get the NOI submitted up to regulatory snuff. Then there's things that are completely separate of it that are
Agreed.
about planning for the overall long-term strategy.
Agree, and
Okay.
that's how we set the stage at the beginning of putting the notes up there. So if there are things that need to be done to execute on a long-term planning strategy, capture them on a note, mark them long-term planning strategy, and let's get them up there. Okay? So if anybody else has anything, right, long-term planning strategy, capture it, right, long-term, and we'll put them up. Okay?
All those easements expired on March 6th. For those property owners that we had worked on a long time ago. To
The MOU from
gain access-
2015?
Gain access to the Furrow property and the other family from Hopeless Road, in case we.
We're
couldn't
getting
come back
sidetracked
after.
here, folks.
They're all gone. That has to be started, those conversations have to be started again because they sold, a lot of them sold the property. And these are new property owners. And it took so long to work that plan out.
Can we
that need
focus
to
here?
start that now.
Yeah, I think that's.
What are we capturing and where is it going? Because I've got two different meetings that I'm running here.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. What is it?
Geotubes in or out, when? Make a decision.
Well, what do you just,
It's
we set the
really-
removal order for June,
Well, that's where they got extended to.
right? So that's what, 60 days?
So I think, a better way to look at that question is in the long-term plan, not considering the current geotubes, but do we want to use geotubes as a technique for the long-term planning of Wisconsin or not?
Right.
Yes or no? If no, then that will inform us about what to do with the current ones. Because if we don't want to use them in the long term, then why would we use them today?
When do we want to start the development of a long-term plan? This is a stupid question.
partial, like, long-term plan, wasn't the planning done as part of like the coastal resiliency planning? Like, isn't that underway? I don't wanna like reinvent that wheel here.
It is, but it didn't get to the granular level
Yeah.
of, it didn't get to the granular level as this is where you need this. You know, it got to, these are the different things we may use. So then you're gonna, if you get to an area, you say, okay, now we're doing it in this area. So it didn't, it didn't lay that out. And I'm struggling because I'm sort of stuck on that. Because a lot of things we're talking about and wish we had, we kind of already have. And a lot of the things, we have agreements to get sand and do this and that now, and I don't know that the town has the capacity to do some of the things we're asking them to do. Or you guys are asking, or all of us are hoping they'll do. So I'm struggling in this, my brain is kind of shutting down because I'm looking, going, yeah, that was agreed upon, that was agreed upon, that was done.
But it wasn't because we don't have an entity willing to do it, and they've completely backed out. So maybe they agreed kind of on paper sometimes, but like they didn't in reality, and they pulled that agreement and there were no plans actually put forth to do it. So
So what you have is the ability to take this document, right, that will be created, and then sit with your staff and say, okay, these are the steps, right, that we feel as two groups working together need to be accomplished. Now you're going to then take your staff's recommendations as to what else needs to be added, right? What do they know needs to be added to this plan or strategy that the two groups together here the two groups here together you didn't come up with something staff knows needs to go on the board, right? They'll then be able to add those, comment to Matt's point, like say, there is no way we can get that done in 60 days, but we can get that done in 120 days. Right? And then you go back as a group together and say, okay, based on our current staff size, bandwidth, our consulting contract size, bandwidth, this is what we can do.
So I'm trying to make sense of, so we all sort of went with this scenario 2, which was do what we could to keep the geotubes in place to buy time while we plan to adapt, right? That's how I understood that thing. We sort of all said, let's try to figure that out. So the very first step in this is, can the geotubes stay? How will they be maintained and who will pay for it? If those things aren't determined, this whole thing we've decided to work on falls apart, and then we go to a different plan, right? Now, the planning for Baxter Road has to happen simultaneously regardless, right? Because if the geotubes are not viable and there's no new NOI and there's no expansion and there's no buying time, we have to plan for Baxter Road anyway. So this feels like we got to figure out whether there's a way to maintain the structures that are in place. Is that financially and logistically viable in terms of staff time, sand sources, funding, et cetera? That's like step 1.
Who's gonna do that? And how are they gonna research that?
Yeah,
Right,
you're absolutely
that's
right.
step 1. That's the thing. That's the first step in our planning.
That's
The
pretty
rest of it
elementary.
waits until that's determined.
Everything else hinges on that.
And that's in your court rather than our court.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
It's
Whatever.
collaborative.
We can't, but no,
No.
so we're going down an enforcement process, so, unfortunately, figuring out the funding and the management on the town.
Not you guys.
No,
It's not
that's
us.
what I
No.
mean, it really isn't.
We've
So,
tried to keep this structure within like the limits that they should be, and they haven't. So that really comes at the town knowing if you can fund it, if Vince or someone in his office can oversee it.
So Jen, you've captured all of that.
I added to it, it's geotubes. Are they part of the plan for Sconset Bluff stabilization? Can we maintain, who will do it, how will we pay for it?
And that's
And
now,
I do
And
think,
that's just the maintain part.
Within 60 days to
now.
I think
90
it's other
days?
things.
if I may.
This is a different sort of thing.
So.
Yeah.
I think trying to get everything into the same timeline is making this confusing.
Yep.
And in my opinion, there's 3 separate actions that all these things generally fall into buckets. There's review the current reality. That's things that exist on the ground today to have to deal with the project, have to deal with compliance, et cetera, whatever. That all falls into one bucket. We could break out a timeline and probably figure out that timeline for that bucket once we put the sticky notes in that bucket. Then there's develop a short-term implementation. That's something like an NOI, a betterment district, all of that stuff to get to a place where we feel comfortable with the solution that's on the ground, but maybe it's not the long-term solution. And then there's things that are way off that are identify a long-term strategy for the resiliency of all of Wisconsin. That's things that are like way beyond this timeline that maybe we don't even need to talk about today, but are going to be informed by this process.
I think that what we can do, I'm gonna take all of those, because everything that's up here will fall into one of those 3 buckets,
Yeah.
right?
And I
So
think
when
we
we
need-
produce this back for you, it will be the short term or the current reality, the short-term implementation, and then the long-term issues, right? And reviewing current reality and determining the short-term implementation, that'll be these things that we have out here in the 1-year mark, right?
Yeah,
But there will
that-
be 2 different tracks.
I think, if I may, it is important to classify which goes into which. so
Well,
that
we'll do that, and you'll get that back.
Okay.
Yep.
Where are we putting this one?
1 year. Okay, and then we had that, again, the development of that long-term plan or strategy. And we're gonna talk about it here. When do we start the development of the long-term plan and strategy?
Now.
Or even determine, well, first the town needs to determine whether or not they can afford to do it, right? And have the resources to get it done. So we can say now, but right now, what they're going to do is have a conversation about resources and money and the ability to get it done. But
Yeah.
we know that's gonna happen, so ideally, when would we like to be kicking off that project to develop a long-term plan?
Years after the, I mean, you're talking long-term coastal resiliency, right?
Yeah, and I think almost that the date that we start, that isn't as important as the duration of that plan. You know, it can start today and it's gonna last 20 years, or it could start 2 years from now, it's still gonna last 20 years. Some of these things are short duration, some of them are long duration, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. What if we put creation, we're kicking off the development of that long-term plan at about the same time that we have that NOI that we've been working on approved? Because then we've noticed what's worked, what didn't work, you know, best practices, which would all be built into a long-term plan. Make sense?
Yeah, I would actually say maybe even after we have a year or 2 of data about whatever. is
About whether or not it works.
Exists on the
Yeah,
ground.
about whether or not it worked.
We're gonna keep going.
Okay, well, actually, what time is it?
20 out.
22. With regard to the agreements, some of these fit within the current state of reality, and then some of them fit within the future state, or the future plan. And we can split these up just based on what we've done there, if you're comfortable with that. And even the funding, we can put the funding ones where they complement, right, where they belong in the current reality and the future reality. Okay? Jen, what are you putting it?
Well, what I heard Brooke say is that we have to decide this soon. Right, that can they stay, can
Yeah.
they afford,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like
the
a
whole
year,
point.
I don't think we put this in the right spot right now.
That's the whole point. I mean, now, we're all having these great discussions. And hopefully we can continue the joint discussions, but that's a decision that has to be made sooner rather than later, so we all know where we're going from there.
I think we gotta talk about that for a second, because we don't have an article on for town meeting
Right.
and town meetings in May.
Yeah.
So yes, we could put something on for November, but November is it's April, that's
Or
a
make a
long
new,
chunk of time.
make a new application.
Okay, so if the town's gonna make an application, I don't even know how we're funding that, it's not in the budget. That's thousands and thousands of dollars, I mean, I don't even know how much that engineering, it was all privately
It's,
funded.
it's more than
Now,
that.
the private funders might come back to the table, but they're not gonna come back to the table if it's a non-starter to do anything that protects their homes. So where are we?
So can I ask a question? And I brought this up at the last meeting. I mean, maybe we are at the point where the plan that RJ presented, and I don't remember what that was called, but as far as like abandoning the town's responsibility for part of that road. Well, I don't know. That's like the only thing I think might be in the bag of tricks, because it doesn't sound like we can fund to maintain the project. It can't stay in damaging the environment, 6 months, a year, so.
It's called discontinuation of the road, and I made a post-it note about it last time. I think it's a strategy that definitely would reduce the town's liability if anything happens, but it doesn't necessarily solve the issue of what happens to the bluff. It just basically makes sure that you don't kind of, as all of the people in town aren't gonna end up being sued.
When someone says, oh, it's just this, we just have to do this. When there's that just this, you can sort of tell it's not gonna be easy. And we've had this, and someone says discontinuance of the road, and it's, all you do is vote and whatever. We tried that, we tried to do betterments out in Sheep's Pond. And we were not allowed to put the betterments on, and the people sued us for $1.2 million, and we had to pay for all that. Now, that was an easy road that you could do with a grader. There were no sewer in there was no water. It was all, septics and stuff out there, 14 homes, give or take. And so we got sued and lost that. So now, so that happened once, it happened twice. So the second time when they wanted to talk to us, they made sure that we would pay for it. So this is tens of millions of dollars to do the roads that we need, or that we are required to give to them. There's no silver bullet to just give the road up. It doesn't exist.
I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but I think it's in our Mary Poppins bag of like, okay, it's out there as something that should be maybe looked at more seriously, given the fact that it sounds like we won't have funding for the project. Like if that's completely unrealistic.
And it is out there, and it's what we're trying, it's what we negotiate when we do a hold harmless with people. We say, we're able to give this up. We're giving you this road, and that's your road, and we have rights of passage over it, but it's yours from now on. And we're getting rid of this. So it's a quid pro quo that we do on that, in those negotiations. So it is important. It is what's happening at Sheep's Pond. We are going to town meeting with all the rock, to swap all the rock for that out there. And it was a lot of work. Linda knows probably more than anybody out at Sheep's Pond. So anyway, I just think that is not going to be simple. And so what we're really what we're facing is we have this situation where, we don't have the money, and it's gonna cost a ton of money to go down the path that we're trying to go down. And we've got this other path that we've lost.
So it's gonna cost you
Matt,
money either
guys,
way,
can I-
either way you go, because.
Folks, can I interrupt and try to get a confirmation here on what we've laid out? Because we've got 16 minutes, okay? So what we've laid out is we will have 3 timelines. We'll review the current reality and the steps necessary to execute on the current reality, develop a short-term plan of implementation, and then identify those longer-term issues that may be up there, okay? Things that you've said you need to do today. Engage the entire town, address the topic of past stand deficit by the SBPF, the new reality, if you will, removal of the enforcement order, remedy of the failed project, make up the current sand deficit, maintenance plan developed, and determine acceptable actions. Everything but engage the entire town has to do with the current reality, correct?
Yeah.
Correct? Okay. I think engage the entire town is also the current reality. but it's in both of the planning processes, right? They've got to be engaged. And we said, really, that's something we need to evaluate. We need to start with that today. We agree? And we said within the next 30 days, we need to determine town staff needed and capacity, and whether or not we need additional consultants and those types of things within 30 days. And that's the current reality.
Well, I think that goes into the short-term
It's
implementation.
both,
But I
okay?
think everybody will tell you that additional town staff and consultants are needed. And I think Don's point is very important too, because additional funding is needed. We're talking
Okay.
about tens of thousands or more of dollars to
Okay,
maybe $100,000.
agree.
to put
We
this in
all agree
place.
we need more money, right? We need money to plan, we need money to design, we need money to execute. Okay, define the geographical extent of the project. That is the current reality.
Can someone
No.
define what they
So
mean
next
by
No,
that?
Sure.
that's to the scope of what's going to be included in the NOI. Is it just Baxter Road?
Or
These-
the other.
Is it these, just these reaches here, or is it go landward and, farther along the bank?
Short-term and long-term.
Yeah, long-term as well.
Okay, both, great. And also define planning partners and stakeholders. Identify various roles for people could play in the planning and execution. Current reality. Short-term planning.
No, current reality, because we're not gonna fund the maintenance of the current project until we identify people who are willing to pay for it.
And then I think it will also become
Minutes
part
no
of
thank you.
your next planning process, right? Okay.
Yeah. So
Develop the list of funding sources.
that's
Stretch
just
out.
comprehensive.
That's for the NOI, the short-term and then the long-term.
Okay, so that's both also. Great, very good. We get out to the 6-month mark, proactive one-on-one homeowner concerns.
That's 60 days.
Did I say 6 months? Sorry, 60 days, proactive one-on-one homeowner concerns, the current reality, the short-term planning,
But they're all
Short-term.
facing the reality right now.
both.
Yeah.
Right, both. Okay, the marketing plan and strategy,
That's all for
short-term
the
reality,
Short-term, yeah, that's all for the
And-
NOI
and then
process.
part of course, the ongoing process, right? Okay, good. Review the NOI, revive the old NOI, identify ongoing legal, technical, regulatory assistance for the NOI process, have all existing data and reports reviewed by the third party. Okay, so that's the current reality.
So that's for the new expanded NOI that's gonna hopefully come in from the town.
Right, that's the current.
No.
Oh,
The
you're
current-
seeing
the
that
current
as another
reality
one.
is the
Okay, all right,
project that
fine.
exists on the ground today.
Yep, that's fine, okay.
I think, Seth,
Down here.
I think you and I are looking at current reality as not the NOI coming down the road.
Not the expanded
Right.
NOI, just
Right.
what exists, the project,
Right.
all the, if there needs to be any like technical updates to NOIs for that project or licenses or whatever. Maybe we can say, we're gonna give up on this and just try to re-permit the project as it exists today. Who knows? But
Okay,
nothing for planning for the future. Yeah.
okay. So when we hit 6 months, we're going to develop a roadmap for the new our NOI, couldn't even read my own writing, okay? 1 year, the new NOI will be filed. Can we maintain who will do it, the geotubes in and out, how do we pay for it, determine if geotubes are part of the plan?
That's all back now.
Yeah.
Right. Go this way.
That's current reality.
Well, it is current reality, but you're gonna make all of these determinations within the next 30 days?
6 months
You
anyway.
asked when it starts.
Okay, then I'm gonna ask you when it finishes, because this one's a big one.
I think whoever ends up being the applicant of this project, whether it's the town or maybe it's a different entity, should come to the Conservation Commission for a pre-submission meeting and say, are geotubes an acceptable alternative? Yes or no? Then we'll give them some guidance on that, and then they can revise their NOI based on what that guidance
When
is.
should that Conservation Commission meeting occur?
Has to be before the NOI.
Well, I know that.
is-
And when should that occur?
it depends who the entity that's gonna submit the
And
NOI is.
I also think, like, we keep talking about the new NOI for expansion. And maybe like a new NOI for expansion isn't realistic at all. Maybe it's just an NOI to maintain what's on the ground. The other areas aren't like in extreme jeopardy right now, and in the amount of years it would take to even manage the current project. Then we have road planning for the other space and don't need to put another structure in there.
Or we do.
Well, regardless,
We
it's
do,
going to
but-
be an NOI conversation.
Or at least you can.
When is
plan
it
the-
going to start?
The later reaches, you, at least you can plan the later reaches if you can
Yes.
find a way to maintain the current project.
Right.
Yeah, I think in this pre-meeting, the applicants could say, here's the list of alternatives we've identified, which of them seem palatable to you? And we can make non-binding recommendations. Here's the geographic extent that we've identified. Does this seem feasible to you? We can make non-binding recommendations. That could happen, 60
Don't you
days from
think that
now.
that's part of the roadmap for the NOI?
Well, all the NOI
Yeah.
stuff's happening at 60 days. I don't understand how it can happen after.
Well, I mean, that's my question, right? We're moving these things around to where they make sense. If the roadmap, if we all agreed that the roadmap for the NOI was going to be at 6 months, then all of these things actually go out to that, well, somewhere between 6 months and a year.
But they're not gonna look for a funding, I'm not sure where, can't read any of it, where the funding source fits in, because they're not gonna look for a funding source to expand it or maintain it until they know that there's a reasonable expectation that the,
Yeah, we didn't
ConCom
even
is
move
gonna-
any of funding
gonna do
over
that.
here yet.
because if there's no fund, if.
Right, we
if
didn't move funding over here yet,
Okay.
right?
this-
So we're
that's
not
my
even
problem
talking
with this
about
whole
funding.
thing. If they don't think there's a high, even at the pre-meeting, like Seth said, that there's a willingness on our part to consider expanding or leaving, they're not gonna bother to go crazy trying to find a funding source to put in the NOI unless they know that we're more amenable to their applying for it. So
I don't think
which
anyone's
comes first, the
disagreeing
chicken
with.
or the egg?
Well, but we're not even talking about fund, like, again, like I said, we didn't even put funding over here yet, right? Because we assume funding comes after you all have made some basic decisions about what it is that you're going to have, what it is that you're going to be funding.
Right,
Well,
but
there's
then
Or what
Yeah.
types
can
of
the town
projects.
even support
Yes.
what we're putting out there is, I think, what we mean by funding.
But here, but I think we did make decisions based on funding and based on input from the ConCom and based on input from the stakeholders of what would be the most reasonable way to move short, medium, and long term. We did all this. And I feel like we're sort of going back, and I don't disagree that they, they were good partners and this was hard, and I get all that. But I'm struggling because I'm like, we've done this. And we're sort of talking about redoing it, and we're gonna take another 10
But
years.
Matt, we didn't do it the right way.
Oh,
Like, that's the thing is, we had people, again, kind of agree to an expanded plan, but like on the idea that they could run a project out of compliance for X number of years. So we were agreeing to someone who wasn't being upfront about what they were doing. So like, although we spitballed ideas with SBPF, nothing, like no true agreements came out of that, and they didn't even agree to move through the NOI in the appropriate way.
I think we've spent 4 hours together. And like, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, right? But it's almost like these 4 hours should have occurred a year ago or a year and a half ago.
Definitely.
Right,
3 or 4
right,
years ago,
so, but it didn't, right? And it's easy to Monday morning quarterback. This is where we are. So you've made a lot of progress in the first 2-hour session and in this 2-hour session. Like, you know what you didn't do, and now you know what you need to do together moving forward, right? Because there's disagreement, there's question, but there's an awful lot of consensus also between the two groups. So I think you should that's a real positive, right? So we might not have all of the answers. We might feel like we're doing this again, and it does feel like you're doing it again because you did it separately before, right? You didn't do it together. So each of you will feel like you're doing something over again. And that happens. It is what it is. But now we move forward, right? So to your point, the NOI is filed at 1 year. So all of these things with regard to the NOI, right? The geotubes in or out, determine if the geotubes are part of the plan, are somewhere between, here's a sketched out roadmap of where we're headed. These are some of the recommendations that we're making, and at a year, we'll file the NOI. And it's really important to know and to agree, and we agreed about this, we agreed to this at the beginning of the meeting, that like this process right here, you're gonna go through this together, right? And it's not a case of, you know, the Conservation Commission reads chapter 1 and says, yes, we agree to it, now move on. Chapter 2, that's not what we're suggesting. But what we are suggesting is that you'll meet, you'll discuss ideas, you'll come to terms with, you know, yeah, we think these can work, maybe that can't work, and then we go on to the next step, right? So you'll develop that NOI, not together, but you can't develop it in together, I know, because it's a regulatory issue, but you will work through the concepts together.
Right, and I think part of it is looking at previous history, like the ConCom has gone through this
You
and
said
made
you've
enough
done that.
suggestions so that it shouldn't be super difficult to figure out what we need. But I mean, also whoever's doing the project needs to be held accountable to their memorandum of understanding or whatever. So like when they were breaking ConCom regulations, that should have been addressed, you know, like where it's been very one.
Okay,
I just
so
want
we're
a
at-
map that looks like
I'm
this.
sorry, if just a couple of more things, because like we're at 2 minutes, and if people can stay a little bit longer, that's great. So we have NOI approval at 1.5 years, long-term plan at 1.5 years, and complete longshore sediment transport study at 2 years, and then we're gonna have all kinds of stuff out here. Can I come back to this and ask you, who's doing what?
Yeah.
Who's doing what? Now we know what we're doing and about when. Now, who's responsible for some of this stuff?
Can I ask a
Sure, Brooke.
question? If the people, if responsibility for the existing geotubes, if someone's gonna take responsibility, some mythical entity, what is the process by which we come to some agreement on what's the minimum requirement for maintenance?
They have to follow.
That's
Probably close to the order of conditions that's on the ground. They need to apply for a notice of intent to maintain that. But again, you'd be looking at probably something similar.
They can't amend it though.
So,
Well,
But
they
they
have
could
to
apply for a new notice
Yeah.
because the order is expired. So they could apply for a new
notice.
notice where all of these things would be negotiated.
Can I ask a question? Vince, was there a sand source that was ever identified in the most recent NOI that was gonna come forward, or they were still working on their sand source?
They had a two-step solution. They were going to continue their current method of locally sourcing and getting from off-oiling sources in a combination as kind of the step one, continue the existing. And they were in the process of looking for offshore.
Yeah.
And once the NOI was withdrawn, I should imagine that ended too.
And they were not gonna expand to you had an NOI with like different expansions. The expansions were tied to them finding the sand source.
Okay.
So,
Who is responsible for engaging the entire town?
me,
Yeah, you all are. Yeah, you
And
all
you
are.
take that on.
You all.
Thank you for your service.
Okay.
sorry, I had to
You-
engage some humor.
Yep,
because
that, it
I'm
worked
tired.
for me.
No, you-
Malcolm,
Who
he's not
is-
here.
Who is responsible for addressing the issues with regard to the current project remedy of the failed project, maintenance development plan, who is the responsible party? That doesn't mean that that person or people do all of the work, but who's
No, I
responsible?
mean,
It's
mostly
the
the
permit
con-
holders and the ConCom.
Working with us,
I'm sorry, I didn't get
The
that.
permit holders,
yeah.
which
and us.
one of them is the town of Nantucket and the other one is SPPF and the ConCom to work together. One of those parties has seemed unwilling to to maintain the responsibility, but they are responsible whether they want to be or not.
Who is going to drive that get together?
The
The
ConCom.
ConCom, yeah.
You will drive that. Okay.
Yeah, we are, we're doing it.
I kind of look, sorry, I look at this and I sort of think, you're sort of saying there has to be a new entity. So we either have to identify a new entity or the town has to take it over. The town has to say, we can take it over, but we can't take it over. And if the staff says we can't take it over for funding or this or that or a bunch of other reasons, then we're going one direction.
Right.
And is that direction identifying the entity or is that direction taking it out and leaving everyone on their own? Like those are the,
Yeah,
like,
One of the
we're
other-
kind of, it's nice.
One of the other tandem steps here, right?
Kind of,
This-
yeah, like we're doing
this
a
step
line,
is-
we're doing a line that isn't gonna be a line.
It's not a
it's-
line,
yeah.
no, but
no, I agree.
But trust me, with magic markers and Post-it notes in a meeting room, it's virtually impossible to do 4D,
I
right?
understand. I'm just-
So,
I think if the town in some capacity is not able to take this on, then we should move to a different scenario. I mean,
Okay.
they don't need to be the primary or sole responsible party, but being the property owner, or at least a partial property owner, if they're not willing to engage in that process, then we need to consider alternate scenarios.
okay, so who is going to determine the town staff needed and the capacity and consultants and what have you? Who's making that determination?
That's why we don't do that until you come
Well,
up.
the select board.
The select
surely.
board, the select board is going to determine, yeah, does the select board agree that that's their really job to look at that and talk to staff about it?
Yeah, in conjunction with staff,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So that's the select board and staff. Define the geographic extent or scope of the notice of intent. Who's going to be responsible for that?
The applicant and the ConCom,
The applicant?
and the ConCom, whatever they ask for something, and then we have to consider it.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
right
it's
now,
the
it seems to
cart
me it's
before the horse again.
maintaining what's
I mean, it's
there.
coming back to what you said.
That's gonna be the scope of it.
Right. Like, I don't, it doesn't sound to me like a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is even remotely realistic for the town.
I just want a map that has each of these areas that says, here are all the possible alternatives that we could take in each of these reaches. The community of homeowners prioritizes these things. The town of Nantucket prioritizes these things. The ConCom prioritizes these solutions. What are some compromises where not everyone's gonna get the solutions they want, but what are the solutions we can agree
Well,
on in different areas?
May I suggest that these are all topics that need to be addressed and discussed. In addition to defining the geographic scope and extent, the stakeholders, the list of funding sources, these are three things among many things that are either going to be done by the town staff or the town's consultant. One or the other, or both, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, in addressing your point, that the DEP superseding order of conditions in 2013 is why the current geotubes are there, or they're not in their current iteration. And that was on an emergency provision that the town could actually move the road within 3 years, and that was 10 years ago.
Okay, I gotta move on.
But yeah,
Ian,
but
sorry,
Ian, some
No,
of
no, I
guys-
understand. but,
some of
in
these
terms of-
alternatives maybe
Right.
do nothing in this, that's
Right.
a acceptable
Yes.
alternative, or remove
But-
something.
Guys, that's gonna all be fleshed out when the town staff, the consultant, and all of you again meet together to work through some of these things, right? So it's on the list. One-on-one proactive, one-on-one engagement with homeowners. Who's responsible for that?
Work.
I'm gonna put here that town staff is responsible, But I want to put a big star here that says every one of you are accountable. Because if your town staff is out there saying one thing and you're back here saying another thing, the whole process is undermined, right? So you've got the town staff that you're putting out there as your representatives, but you've got to be behind them. Okay, so you're all accountable for that. The marketing plan or strategy,
No, that's not how we function.
what?
Yeah, I mean, as a
We're not out there
regulatory
advocating.
board, yeah, it's
No
like,
regulatory board advocates.
Nobody told you to advocate.
Well, you're standing behind what? We have to stand behind whatever decision we make and whatever agreement we have with the applicant as well as the select board. But we're not out there grandstanding.
Nobody suggested that you were grandstanding. You're walking up to aisle number 5 in the grocery store, and Mabel Smith from down the street knows that you sit on the Conservation Commission board, and she asks some question. You're really accountable to everyone to support whatever, as a collective group, you've sent the town employees out to tell these homeowners. You feel that you would stand there and say something completely contrary to,
No, I wouldn't
What?
commit if we have an active application in front of us, having been on the planning board and the zoning board. You're not committing to anything because you have an active application.
so then you say to Mabel Smith, we have an active application in front of us. I'm really not privy to talk to you about that. But you would never say something counter to what is being discussed in the application.
Yeah, I mean, the select board,
Outreach is for the select board.
The
I'm
select-
not disagreeing with you, but that, what I'm saying is that I find it very hard to believe that on the island of Nantucket, you are not individually approached at any one moment in time with a question about what's going on.
I think we are, but.
And when you are, you can't undermine the process. You have to support the process that you're all going through together.
Yes and no. I mean, you could say, hey, this is the way you participate. The meeting is on this date, but to Linda's point, I mean, you can't say that you're supporting aspects of. a future
Nobody's telling
notice,
you to
right?
say
Well,
you're
that's it.
supporting it. No one's saying to say you're supporting it. You can tell people how they engage. You can tell them when to engage and what to engage. I'm just saying that you can't support something, but you also can't publicly not support it. Maybe that's the way to phrase this.
Practically.
That happens here all the time.
It shouldn't.
That little sticky up there is saying who's going to talk to the public and outreach and stuff. And that is not the ConCom. That is not a regulatory board. That is the select board to disseminate the information.
I didn't put ConCom on here. I put the town staff here to communicate with the homeowners and the property owners. I am simply saying that you are all collectively as a group accountable to support the process, accountable to, again, not support or undermine what is being worked on.
I think the word accountable is what I'm having trouble with.
Well, what word would you like to put there?
Support the process,
All of you support the process, works for me.
and that we're all working hard towards a common goal, that kind of thing.
Perfect, works for me. I just picked accountable. Okay, we're all on the same page. We have 1 year, the roadmap for the NOI. Who's developing the roadmap for the NOI?
hopefully the town, if they can put
Town,
in
yeah.
funding, but it sounds like they might not be able to.
Would be town with consultants.
With consultants. Okey doke, thank
So when we
you.
say town, that could be consultants or staff or.
Yep. Works. And then reviewing the NOI, having an opinion, if you will, on the geotubes. I think it's the same group, town and consultants. Filing the new NOI.
Same group.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're agreeing that as we're working through this, right, that we're doing it as a group, right? It's a process that we're going to work through together.
Yeah, the only thing that is difficult is as a regulatory board, the working together is non-binding. And especially as members change and as things go over, we
I
can
think
provide,
everyone knows that.
we can
think
provide
that's been said
input.
many
That's,
provide
yeah,
advice.
we all get that, and
Public
frankly,
understands.
I was gonna say, and frankly, that's not unique to here. Nor is it unique to any government regulatory agency, right?
That's fine, as long as,
And I do
I've
think
said it
it's-
many
I
times,
think
but
it's important to state many times because I do think there's a little bit of confusion over like this process. So that the public does know that we each know our roles
Yes.
and that the ConCom is strictly regulatory.
Absolutely. And duly noted for the public out there in ether world, wherever they are.
Oh, well.
Did you have a comment?
Yes, why is the NOI being prepared by the town rather than the applicant?
The town's the
Is that it?
applicant.
Town is the applicant.
Hold on a second.
Town's the applicant?
They own the real estate.
Okay,
Currently, it was SB.
Who would join that?
Co-op.
the approval of the NOI,
that would be the
Conservation
ConCom.
Commission. Long-term plan for expansion, long-term plan for expansion of the existing CIP, or, yeah, CRP, CIP. That's
That gets
the
in,
town.
into town,
Crack,
crack,
Crack.
MP and EDC,
Yeah,
staff, I mean, that's
this is town consultants.
probably out at like
boards and committees.
multiple years.
Boards and committees.
Sewers.
Okay,
Those easements are not taking forever. Get them back. Because the same people-
now again, all of the notes with regard to funding and agreements will be plugged in here or will be added as subtext to here. Is there anyone around the table who feels that we have seriously missed a step in the process? Now, I think Matt said it, a couple of people have said it, the steps are gonna change, right, based on the outcomes. It's like an IRS tax form, right? If here, go to line 5B kind of thing, right? That's how this is gonna play out. But does anyone feel we missed something big?
I don't think we missed it, but I just see it if we can't find a way to maintain what's there, there's, I don't know how you move forward.
That's the first fork in the road
Yeah,
for me.
some say it's very
And
black and white here.
There's gotta be some compromise on how to do it.
And then what do we do coming going forward immediately?
And that's conservation that's leading that charge? Who's
No.
leading that charge?
We're the repository of things, we're the receivers. That has to be worked out between SBPF, the homeowners, the select board, and then they come to us. We're not the ones going out there and saying, do this, do this, do this. They have to come to the regulatory board to come up with some sort of an agreement or a solution. Or
We
something.
could give them advice
We can,
throughout that
on a
process,
preliminary,
preliminary advice, yeah.
but we're not going out there seeking something.
No, it's not our job to say we
Okay.
want this.
All right, we have hit a quarter after. I know everybody has commitments. Thank you very much for your time. We'll work again, all of these notes together along with the last notes and you'll get a document. If there's nothing else, thank you on behalf of myself and Jen.
Well,
And
thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Yeah, we
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thanks,
This isn't
guys.
easy.
This is.
You're welcome.
not as-
You're very welcome. So as chair, you need to adjourn your meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So motion to adjourn made by
I
Linda,
just got back.
by Quiet, seconded by Seth. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
Thank you.
This is Brooke. I make a motion to adjourn the select board meeting.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 4-0. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you.